No television show in American history has ever created as profound a cultural impact as Soul Train. Then in 2006, the show abruptly vanished without a farewell. All details surrounding its conclusion were kept under wraps except for one, a recorded episode that never aired. What unfolded behind those unreleased scenes? Let us go back to the beginning to explore today's story in depth. Hey there, and welcome aboard. You're right on time for another super slick ride on the Soul Train. Don Cornelius was born in 1936 in the South Side of Chicago, growing up in an America deeply divided by racial segregation. Before entering the world of television, he held several working-class jobs including traffic officer and salesman. In 1966, he enrolled in a short-term broadcasting course and was soon hired as a reporter at WCIU-TV, a local Chicago station. And if that's your feeling, we'd like to hear about that. Also, we're going to take our first call and find out just what it was there that he conceived and launched a new project called Soul Train, a music program dedicated to the Black community. Soul Train first aired on August 17, 1970 in Chicago. It began with live performances featuring local dancers and guest musicians and quickly made waves. Applause. Just over a year later, on October 2, 1971, the show was broadcast nationwide, with sponsorship from major companies, such as Sears and Johnson Products Company. Music. With its energetic music, bold fashion, and signature dance moves, Soul Train became a television phenomenon. During its golden years, the show featured a lineup of legendary artists: James Brown, Aretha Franklin, Marvin Gaye, Michael Jackson, the Jackson 5, and later LL Cool J and Mary J. Blige, all performed on the Soul Train stage. It wasn't only a platform for singers. It launched the careers of dancers like Rosie Perez, Jody Watley, Clinton Gent, and Jeffrey Daniel, who would later join the group Shalimar and teach Michael Jackson the moonwalk technique. Applause. Music. One of the program's most iconic segments was the Soul Train line, a dance showcase where two rows of people faced each other, taking turns stepping into the center aisle to perform their own signature moves. Music. It was more than just entertainment. It was a space for self-expression, fashion, culture, and personal identity. For viewers, it became a weekly cultural. Back in the day, there was an incredible television show called Soul Train that completely changed the game. A program that wasn't just another entertainment slot on the schedule, but a cultural earthquake that shifted how America saw itself. Nothing else on television had the kind of impact it did when it came to music, dance, fashion, and most importantly, the visibility of Black culture. For African Americans especially, Soul Train was never just about the beats or the moves. It was a spotlight, a mirror, and a gathering place all rolled into one. A rare space where they could shine in ways television had never truly allowed before. At its peak, the show wasn't just popular. It was an institution, a weekly ritual that families and friends looked forward to. A Saturday morning and afternoon tradition in living rooms across the country. For over 3 decades, it ran, consistently delivering some of the most joyful, vibrant, and groundbreaking television in history. And then, almost suddenly, in 2006, it was gone. No big farewell, no official goodbye, no chance for audiences to say thank you or reminisce. The show simply stopped airing, fading away with only silence to mark its passing. There was one last episode filmed, but it never made it to television, and that mysterious, untelevised final taping has since grown into a legend of its own. For many fans, the confusion and secrecy surrounding that ending is the most painful part of the story. To understand how such a cultural force unraveled, though, we have to go back to the man who made it all possible in the first place, Don Cornelius. Don Cornelius was born in 1936 in Chicago, a city bursting with energy, but also one deeply divided by segregation and unwritten rules that kept Black and white communities apart. Like so many young Black men of his era, his opportunities were limited and life was never easy. He worked an assortment of jobs to make ends meet, selling insurance, driving, even directing traffic as a Chicago police officer. But the grind wasn't enough for him. Cornelius was restless, a man of ambition who carried bigger dreams in his heart. By the mid-1960s, he decided to take a leap of faith, leaving behind stability to pursue a career in broadcasting. In 1966, he enrolled in broadcasting school, a bold move that would shape his destiny. Soon afterward, he managed to land a job as a news reporter at a Chicago television station. It was there, while watching the daily churn of programming, that the seed for something truly groundbreaking began to take root. Working in that newsroom, Don noticed what was missing from the airwaves. Television was full of variety shows and music programs, but there wasn't a single one that authentically celebrated Black culture or showcased Black talent on its own terms. What existed largely catered to white audiences, and when Black artists appeared, they were often asked to fit into a mold, stripped of the rawness, rhythm, and soul that truly defined the community. Cornelius realized there was not only room for something different, but a desperate need for it. So he created it. The idea was deceptively simple, a local dance and music show that would be vibrant, youthful, unapologetically Black, and unlike anything else on television. He called it Soul Train. On August 17, 1970, the very first episode aired in Chicago. It featured a mix of live music, local talent, and of course, plenty of dancing. Almost instantly, audiences went wild. It was fresh, it was stylish, it was fun, and most importantly, it was authentic. It didn't try to explain Black culture to outsiders. It simply lived in it. The concept took off with such momentum that within just over a year, on October 2nd, 1971, Soul Train went national. With backing from corporate sponsors like Sears and Johnson Products, the show spread to television stations all over the United States. That financial support kept the lights on. But it was the energy of the show, the sound, the color, the rhythm, that made it soar. Each episode was like a festival, a burst of life broadcast into millions of homes. It was a celebration of Black music, Black style, and Black creativity. The golden years of Soul Train were truly legendary. Some of the biggest names in music made appearances that are still talked about to this day. James Brown, Aretha Franklin, Marvin Gaye, Michael Jackson, and the Jackson 5, icons who lit up the stage and created moments that became cultural history. As the years went on, new generations of performers took the stage, too, from hip-hop trailblazers to R&B superstars like LL Cool J and Mary J. Blige. Yet the magic of the show wasn't only about the celebrities. The dancers themselves became stars in their own right. The Soul Train dancers were a phenomenon, bringing styles from the streets directly into American living rooms. For some, the exposure was life-changing. Rosie Perez, who later became an acclaimed actress and choreographer, got her start dancing on Soul Train. Jody Watley dazzled audiences before going on to a Grammy-winning music career. Jeffrey Daniel, another dancer, made music history when he taught Michael Jackson the moonwalk, a move that would become one of the most iconic in the history of pop culture. And then there was the Soul Train line, the show's most iconic tradition. Picture it, 2 rows of dancers facing one another, forming a tunnel of rhythm and anticipation. One by one, dancers strutted, glided, spun, and slid down the middle, showing off their most creative moves while everyone else clapped, cheered, and hyped them up. It was joyous, raw, and unforgettable. A ritual of fun that perfectly embodied the spirit of the show. For audiences at home, Soul Train wasn't just television. It was representation. It was pride. It was a chance to see Black men and women on screen looking confident, stylish, and powerful in an era when mainstream television rarely made room for that image. For the dancers, the experience could mean everything: exposure, opportunity, and the possibility of launching into a bigger career. At the very least, it was a chance to become part of something immortal, a cultural revolution broadcast weekly into homes across the country. At the center of it all was Don Cornelius. He wasn't just the smooth-voiced host with a calm, cool demeanor. He was the mastermind. Every detail, what songs were played, how the sets looked, what kind of choreography was allowed, passed through his vision. His presence was serious, sometimes even stern, giving the show a tone unlike any other music program. He was determined to make television reflect everybody, not just white audiences. And he worked tirelessly to ensure that Black culture was shown in a positive, dignified, and celebratory light. Over more than 3 decades, Soul Train produced over 1,000 episodes, becoming the longest-running music television show in history. At its peak in the late 1970s and early 1980s, it attracted millions of viewers every week. It became so influential that it grew beyond the television screen into fashion events, merchandise, and the annual Soul Train Awards, which celebrated excellence in Black music and culture. In 1971, Life magazine even named Cornelius one of the 100 most important people in America. But when something grows that big, challenges are almost inevitable. Cornelius was famously strict about control. Rosie Perez once recalled how he ordered her to change her choreography because it didn't fit his vision. He kept a close watch on the image of the show, making sure it never crossed into territory he considered inappropriate. That level of oversight worked in the early years, but as the culture shifted, it began to create friction. Another issue was money. Despite fueling the program's popularity, most of the dancers never got paid. The exposure of being on national television was considered reward enough. But over time, resentment built. Their creativity helped keep the show alive. Yet, they saw little in return while the program earned millions. That bitterness became one of the darker footnotes of the Soul Train legacy. Then came hip-hop. By the late 1980s, rap was exploding, reshaping American music and culture. But Don Cornelius wasn't convinced it belonged on his show. He felt the lyrics and themes, often raw, political, or aggressive, clashed with the uplifting, stylish vibe he wanted Soul Train to represent. In 1992, he openly said he didn't want to promote music he considered negative. That stance, however, left him at odds with younger generations. Critics accused him of being out of touch, while other shows like Yo!, MTV Raps, and BET's Rap City embraced the movement and became cultural touchstones for hip-hop. As artists like Tupac, Nas, and Snoop Dogg skyrocketed, they rarely appeared on Soul Train, and younger viewers noticed. Ratings began to slide. In the early 1980s, the show boasted more than 4 million weekly viewers. But by the early 2000s, that number had fallen to around 2 million. With the audience shrinking, stations began pushing the program into less desirable time slots or dropping it altogether. In 1993, after 23 years as host, Cornelius stepped down. Replacement hosts like Maestro Clark, Shamar Moore, and Dorian Gregory tried to carry the torch, but none had the gravitas, authority, or iconic presence of Cornelius himself. The show tried to adapt with new sets, updated looks, and eventually more hip-hop artists, but the magic was slipping away. Meanwhile, television itself was changing. The rise of cable, music videos, and eventually the internet offered audiences endless alternatives. Producing Soul Train became more expensive just as its viewership declined. From 2003 to 2006, fewer and fewer episodes were produced each season and staff members left for other opportunities. Cornelius himself, once the very image of the show, withdrew from public life, rarely appearing at events or giving interviews. His pride and joy was starting to feel like a relic of another era. Then came 2006 and the mysterious final episode. Accounts from that day describe chaos. The production crew was changed at the last minute. The guest lineup seemed uncertain and disorganized. Some insiders even claimed Cornelius himself appeared backstage, though officially he had long since stepped away. Those who knew him sensed his disappointment at how far the show had drifted from his original vision. The scheduled performer was a young hip-hop artist whose management clashed with the staff, delaying the taping for over an hour. When the performance finally happened, those present later claimed the music, the dancing, and the visuals went further than Soul Train had ever gone before. Too edgy, too explicit, too far removed from a family-friendly vibe Cornelius had always insisted upon. Reportedly, Cornelius stepped in and halted the shoot. He called for an emergency meeting with the distribution companies, still airing the program nationwide. Not long afterward, Tribune Entertainment, one of the key distributors, pulled out. Within 3 weeks, more than 40% of local stations dropped the show. With no support left, production shut down. There was no farewell episode, no tribute, no grand send-off, just silence. The Soul Train website stopped updating. Time slots were quietly filled with other programming. A cultural giant disappeared, not with a bang, but with a whisper. Rumors swirled about that unaired episode. Former staffers admitted that footage exists, tucked away in private collections. Fans pieced together stories online, calling it a cursed performance that killed the show. Whether or not that is true, the fact remains that the taping marked the end of one of the most groundbreaking shows in television history. The fallout went beyond the loss of the series. It cast a shadow over the legacy Don Cornelius had spent his life building. After Soul Train ended, Cornelius avoided talking about it. In a rare 2007 radio interview, he simply said, "I think it went far enough," and left it at that. Those close to him felt he was heartbroken, unable to reconcile the show he had created with the way it ended. Former dancers described the end as an unnamed sadness. Dorian Gregory, one of the last hosts, revealed the staff wasn't even told what was happening. They just noticed the production schedule vanish. A 2008 Vibe magazine article later suggested that the show didn't end because of ratings, but because trust between the people making it had completely fallen apart. The Soul Train Awards continued for a few years after 2006, but by 2009, they were handed off to BET, where they adopted a more modern style that nodded faintly to the original program, but felt like a different entity altogether. For longtime fans, it was like watching the closing of a door that might never reopen. In the end, the story of Soul Train is one of brilliance and tragedy. A cultural juggernaut that defined a generation and gave Black culture one of its proudest and most influential platforms. It inspired countless artists, launched careers, and shaped American television forever. But instead of a triumphant finale, it slipped away in confusion and secrecy, its legacy tinged with the mystery of an unaired final episode. For those who grew up with it, the memory remains vivid. Families gathered around the TV, kids trying to copy the moves, everyone waiting for the Soul Train line. For all its complications, Soul Train remains an unforgettable chapter in television history. A program that didn't just entertain, but redefined what was possible on the small screen.